Hello, everybody. I apologize for not having those tools available electronically, but they're really four very simple graphic organizers. In the interest of brevity, one of the tools is just a cartoon of the well-known parable of seven blind men trying to discover and describe an elephant just by touching each part of the elephant individually. I use that very often to underscore the fact that we often come to similar life experiences with different perspectives and come away with quite different impressions of what that experience is. And relatively speaking, to come to a school like Community School for Creative Education that's founded on Waldorf premises and that has wraparound services is quite a different animal than your normal public educational school setting. And so I use that tool just to let people understand that very often, even though we all went to school, we all didn't go to the same school and never came out with exactly the same kind of perception. And then when you're talking about trying to establish something new and something innovative, and trying very hard to incorporate community support for that particular endeavor, it's very, very important to understand where everybody's coming from and the fact that they're not all coming from the same place. I'm an old baseball player, and my favorite baseball coach, who affected my life tremendously, used to always say, first things first, catch the ball, then you throw the ball. But you can't throw the ball unless you catch the ball. Relative to the tools that I've tried to help the leadership of community school develop, one of the very most important first things first is the area of communication, often taken for granted, uh, equally often poorly executed. Um, and when you're trying to establish a community perception of the benefits of this kind of education for the school, for the students, I should say, and for the community, is so very important to have your communication skills finely honed, especially on the part of the staff, because they're the ones who are the conduits between the concept of community school for creative education and the actual execution of that particular set of concepts in reality. Well, one of the organizers has that I use is the seven C's. It's a very cliche kind of approach to communication, but there are only seven C's that really surround all the kinds of communication, verbal, oral, or written. And none of them can be omitted. It's first things first, always with the seven C's. To be clear, to be concise, to be concrete, to be correct, to be coherent, complete, and most of all, especially when dealing with community, to be courteous, to make no assumption that your position, your drive, your ambition is somehow um, set you apart from the necessity of being courteous with the community and the people that you're trying to serve. Of those seven C's, some of them are so obvious that we take them for granted, and we're pretty good about communicating as a school staff member to community, especially in the areas of being correct. We usually are good about making sure we've got our facts straight. Um, we usually are pretty good about being concrete, that is, not speaking too much in terms of philosophy, but in terms of actually what is going on. We're not real good about being concise. We tend to go on and bring in lots of different pieces of information that do not actually help a community person unfamiliar with the new school to understand what is actually going on. We're certainly not very coherent. That is, that's attaching all of our ideas to how it fits into the community setting and all of the perceptions that the community may have for a new school. Um, and most of all, we are very, 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 very careful to be courteous. And sometimes in the effort to move something forward, we forget that particular C. To check yourself often in all of your communications around these seven C's, I have found in my experience really helps solidify trustworthy communication between staff and the community. Um, Again, in the interest of brevity, moving toward the next set of concepts that I've tried to counsel staff at the community school around is the concept of who needs to know when. We very often have events, as in the role play, um, not a very nice event of illegal dumping on the front of the school. Sometimes we have very positive events like a fundraising or a gala or something that has to take place that's very festive. Uh, Very often we have traumatic events, you know, something like accident at a school or some sort of negative occurrence. Regardless of the event, who needs to know and when becomes very, very critical, especially if you can keep all of your communications within those 7 C's. Obviously, the people who are first on scene for any event, positive or negative, need to be sure that they know exactly what's taken place and how to communicate what has happened with each other. Then the next circle has to do with those people that are directly affected by the event, whatever that event may be. So they are next in line to know what has happened again as completely and as coherently as possible. And finally, the parts of the community that are indirectly affected, as time goes on, they can be brought on board as to what has happened. Why is this who needs to know when so important when you're trying to establish community support for a new endeavor or continued support now for an endeavor that's gone on for quite a while? I would submit this, that everything that takes place in a community and in a community school in particular is of very high importance to lots of people, not the least of whom are the students and the families that occupy that school. And so, what they need to know about what is happening that affects them directly is very, very important to have take place in a very uh, appropriate time frame, as close to the event as possible. If you're changing something as simple as when the school time starts or when the drop off lane is going to be open for the children, they need to know immediately that that is happening in order for them to continue to support even the smallest change, the smallest event around their school. And as the events become larger and more impactful, so does the importance of knowing who has to know what when. And I would submit, in the end of the day, everybody needs to know everything right away. And so that's why I've always stressed with staff not to hold information tightly, but to share it and have it complete in a very, very timely way so that the community can feel safe and secure and understanding what's taking place around their school. The students absolutely need to know what's happening if they're directly affected given any particular event. And the final tool that I've used has to do with self-assessment around every staff member's strengths or weaknesses or areas of growth, not really weaknesses, in their communication skills entirely. Some of us are gifted and with good oral communication skills, and some of us are gifted with great written communication skills, and other of us are very, very intuitive and can use nonverbal communication and notice nonverbal communication cues very, very easily. My challenge to staff is to get out of their comfort zone. And if you're good about writing an email, but you're bad at one on one face to face meetings, work on becoming better at face to face meetings. You're already good at writing your email. How good are you at looking somebody in the eye and sharing something that's very important about their student, about the curriculum, about what's happening? And the reverse is true. If you're a real personable staff member and you get along with folks when you're in their physical circle, that's very good and that's terrific. How are you when it comes time to actually writing something down, like a procedure or a process that really affects the education and the processes that take place in the school? If you find yourself wanting there, take your own time to work on developing your written skills. The hardest of all is to notice the nonverbal communications that take place, the tone, the pace of speech, or the vocabulary chosen in a written communication, the body language when you're in a meeting with somebody, especially if you're not culturally attuned to what different cultural aspects of behavior may be. Sometimes it's not the very best thing to look somebody directly in the eye. Sometimes it's not the very best thing to get very close to someone's personal space. Then to understand what cultural norms and cultural comforts are in a nonverbal sense is an extremely important, obviously, but very difficult skill to develop. But my challenge for staff has always been to develop those skills with which you need some growth in terms of communication. If your communications are clear, concise, if they're concrete, correct, if they're coherent, and if they're courteous, if you're communicating with folks um, in a timely way, especially around things that affect them tremendously, um, and if you are keen on developing your own communication skills and become a better communicator from the staff perspective toward the community, I think these are the things that go a long way to establishing the effectiveness of that partnership and therefore the effectiveness of the service you can present to the students and the community. Um, in in keeping community school for creative education going forward, I think very deeply in my heart that these kinds of skills among staff especially are so very, very important and can never ever take a back seat to just the curriculum or just uh, what is taking place by the schedule. I think the communication of all of these things is very, very key to the continued success of the school. And I'm looking at the time, and I think I will succeed my time to the next presenter because I think we're running very close to the end now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to be extremely succinct. The one thing that I think we can never ever ignore is the fact that we have to have authentic and real communication. And there are a lot of things, and everything that has been already been said is what it should look like. So I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to just leave one tool. There's a whole lot you have to do in order to get a school up and running and functioning, and all the things that have already preceded me are some of those things you have to consider. I was primarily focused on curriculum instruction and teacher development. When you start a school like Waldorf, which is an extremely different model of what it means to teach and to learn, I think if you want to actually reach out to public school teachers who are already certificated in by their state to be a teacher, you want to find the teacher that wants to be able to teach the children differently than they are being mandated at the present time, and they're willing and they're searching for that different thing. They're willing to learn it, they're willing to practice it, and because they already know the demands from the state, because those demands don't go away just because you started a private school or a public school or any other kind of school. You still got to meet those same demands. They already know those things, and that's the hardest part for someone coming the other way, because you get a Waldorf teacher and they're going like, well, that's not the way we teach. I'm not going to do that to those kids. No, I'm going to do that, blah, blah. And they have a lot of resistance, and rightfully so. I'm not negating the fact they have that resistance. But what you want is someone who's already a teacher, who has those qualities and says, I want to do things differently. And what I'd like to do is do what you do, because I like what I see. When you do that, you will lose fewer teachers. But if you start from the other end, you will lose a lot of teachers, and you'll have copious amounts of resistance, because they also have to get a teaching credential, because the credential they have as a Waldorf is a certification to teach Waldorf, but it is not recognized as a California teaching credential. So have them come with that already. and have them be good at their practice of what they're doing right now, and have them be willing to put in the work to become a superior teacher and to teach the whole child. So that's the one tool I'm going to leave you with, because I don't want everybody else to have an opportunity to say what they need to say as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davidson. I want to ask if Miss Betty Lai, if you would like to add something.
Yeah, I mean, what just brought in about the communication, very important. Again, what I've emphasized earlier was the level of engagement, of parent engagement within the school. Communication is key. You know, you just have to build that relationship with good communication to be able to have better outcomes.
Thank you. Miss Lee, would you like to add a closing word before we open it for discussion?
Yes, so yes, I agree with everybody. It's about the communication is very the key thing to communicate with parent, and also I am after the handwork teacher, so sometimes the communication between the teacher and the student, that's the key for me to just to find a way how to communicate with student. Just put it in the other words. So some kids they have the hard time, or they are well, yeah, not they need some arts to create their learning. So we are there to help them with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thus far, the way we are harnessing community to optimally serve our children, we'd love reflections. If there's no questions, the way we like to close is what we say, call it give one, get one. But first, we ask the attendees if there's something where you said, this really resonated with what I've been grappling with. I'm going to share it. Please share. If it's this really reminds me of something that I already saw well implemented, please share. But we'd love to hear from our attendees as well, so that all voices are heard in this space, because we're a learning community and on the journey together.
Thank you. So any additional thoughts or questions from the attendees? And Ida, I love your approach in moving ahead and how we'll close. But what I want to say is that this has been so rich for me today. And in the way that I learn, I go back and I take it in, and I've been writing questions like crazy. So know that these questions are coming to you. We're going to create all of these questions, and we're going to send them out and make sure that they're in the treasure chest. You're doing such incredible work, and your passion is so evident, and it's coming from that place of authenticity that is impacting the world. It's impacting the world. I know, even with the 95 participants that have signed up for this course, and many more that are wanting to, that once they have time to listen to the work that you're doing, they're really going to be nourished, and probably many more questions will come. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for showing up in the fullness of your power. And I turn it back to you, Ida.
Thank you very much. I would say that again. I think, can we ask if those who are on the panel, if you would be willing to share emails, then we will share them with the treasure chest, so that people could follow up with any questions on the tools and the sharings. And we want to say that now that we've started to sit in a circle, we know we are on this circle joined together, and the journey has just begun. We have so much to do to serve our children.
And one additional thought from each of you as we bring that final closure. I'm not ready to let you go yet. I know I have to, but just that one final thought from all of you. This is so rich. Thank you.
So I want to start for the thought so I can get the thought in. And it's something that Edie and I were talking about yesterday. The way that we were able to make it work for the teachers is that we had an experienced mentor named Monica from the East Coast who came. And then you had me from California. And it was our consistent, continual conversation about what we were seeing in the classroom that has helped us to design practices for those teachers in the classroom. Because I'd come away and say, that circle took like 30 minutes. And she would go like, none of our circles should take that long. And it's like, well, that's good to know. So we were then able to figure out what is the teaching practice that we need to address here, because I wasn't a Waldorf kid, and I don't have that expertise. So we're both drinking water from different wells, but we combine the water to make some tea. And you have to have tea time regularly, and it needs to be sustained. So again, it's still communication, but you have to have those two experts talk together. So that those specialists, because they're the ones that are going to drive the way instruction is going to take place and develop the structures for that instruction on the campus.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson. And that would be Miss Monica Alexandra, who is an experienced Waldorf coach, and Dr. Davidson, who is there as a standards-based or experienced urban school coach. Do you want to pass it on to the next one, Dr. Davidson?
Go ahead.
Jump in? Can I jump in just for a second?
Please.
I just have to say, even though I'm enjoying retired life in Sonoma, my heart is always going to be in curriculum and instruction. And I just have to say thank you, Dr. Davidson, for your comments, because the magic happens when you have that connection between student and teacher. And your comments about the necessity for having a great teacher want to become greater resonates with me tremendously. And it is certainly something that is at the very, very heart of success of the community school. Just keep finding those wonderful people who are just willing to take great and be greater. Thank you.
I'll jump into that. I do agree with a great school with great staff. We will have great families. Working with Head Start, I work closely with the school, with Dr. Oberman, in transitioning kindergartens, TKs, into the school. Oftentimes, parents ask about, well, what's the difference of a community school versus a Oakland Unified School District school? So then here I am, once I go through the Waldorf training, I learned about the very deep roots, what Waldorf is about. And I'll be able to explain to families the difference, so then they have choices. It's all about choices. Once families, know about the relationship with the community, the school, and all the stuff that the school are doing, the food pantry, the summer school, all that stuff are happening. We're bringing families in. We're not just serving the community families, we're serving the community with food pantry, with summer school, with just everything. The vaccine clinic coming up, that's happening with school start. And so with the connections that we're engaged in with Miss Emma, with getting all these community-based organizations, working with them. So it's very, very crucial, communicating, relationship building, the trust, and just all of the above really makes things great outcomes.
Miss Lee?
Okay, so I just want to back with Miss Betty's about the building the trust with between the family and the student, the beside of We have the pantry, the food pantry at school, and then we have the the committee in school, but also in our school we have the special handbook. So that's the way, that's a different way for the student. Um, they can learn from there. So that our school we have the special, like the special arts for for the student who need to find a different way to learn in order to improve their education.
Thank you. Miss Emma.
Close this part by, just saying how humble I feel to be, in this room, learning from your wisdom and all the love that each one of you put. I know how hard I'm not an educator. However, I have been working around education for almost 30 years. So I always say the last job that I will do is gonna be a school principal, because I know that it's 24 hours, 7 days, so I really admire every one of you, appreciate, and I know that you are transforming not only a child life, but the families and community lives, which is a huge gift. So thank you so much. And I'm gonna say in my own words as somebody with faith, I hope I'm not offending anyone, but may the Holy power that you believe, however you call, continue blessing and providing the wisdom that you need every single day to continue showing with love every day, regardless of what you carry inside of your heart. So thank you so much.
Yesterday, I gave a presentation at an equity conference, and it was about how to be a culturally responsive educator. And one of the things I had to introduce to the teachers that were there, and this is all research based, and what was lovely is that Waldorf did it organically as part of who they are as an institution, meaning the Waldorf methodology for teaching and learning of the children. But it was important for me to explain to my participants that when you understand that 79% of all the teachers that are in classrooms, and this is data, are white middle class women who don't live in the San Antonio district of Oakland. What happens is they commute into a community and then they leave the community. What you have, and my questions were, how many of you have ever walked around the neighborhood? How many of you shop where your kids shop? How many of you have taken the time before school starts to make a home visit so that you can introduce yourself to the parents even before you meet the children? Because you must, if you are going to become a culturally responsive educator, which means you are looking at every single child for who they are, the assets that they bring to you, and their rich cultural wealth, you have to go beyond driving to a parking lot, getting out of your car, going into your classroom and teaching, and then going home, because you must understand the cultural lens of all of your kids. And one of the best ways to understand a child in your classroom is to talk to the parent, because that parent knows more about this child than you will ever know. You'd also want to build that relationship so the parent and you become team members. You are co-working so that you are doing what is best for that child. Then when you bring in the community and understand, where does the child eat? Where does the parent work? Where do they go after school when they're not doing regular after school programs? You can then develop your relationship, because you cannot teach whom you do not know. You must have a relationship with someone to actually teach them, because without the relationship, you can't see them. And if you don't see them, then what you'll do is what you've always done without understanding if it is good or not good for that child. So I just wanted you to know that what Dr. Oberman said is not just this is what Waldorf does. We have an entire country now that is trying to do what Waldorf has been doing. And now they're going to workshops to understand, oh, I got to do this in order to teach the kid. Okay, so I just want you to know this isn't new. This has been thoroughly researched. So now we are bringing it into standard traditional public education.